Oh, that's hot. That's hot. So, you found Friedrich Sophie. And today's video is a video about the origin of freedom. And I'm just gonna read it to you. So, there is this somewhat famous phrase that goes, with freedom comes responsibility. And I don't think everyone sees it this way, but I think inside everyone there's at some point a reaction to this phrase. That is something like the one you would have if you had a cool friend that has a very annoying best friend. And they're always together. So if you ever want to go out or even see the guy, the friend is there. And it's not that you hate him or her, because he's not evil, but he's a pain in the ass. So the logic thing, it's only logic to at least wish you could for once meet this friend of yours on your own. Here's the thing, and this may be clear to many people, but I think that is unclear to enough people to make the proposition. This phrase is true, but you could make the exact mirror phrase, and it will also be true. With responsibility comes freedom. I'll give you an example of this. Let's keep the two things, freedom and responsibility, separated for now. We'll describe them in a parallel way. Let's imagine you're a kid. Well, it's very clear in this example that you don't have a lot of freedom. And the main reason for that is your parents. They are the ones that almost always stop you from doing something you want to do or tell you what you have to do. Okay, so at the same time, and in an unrelated manner, for the sake of this argument, you have zero responsibility. You're just a child. So no one would hold you accountable for your actions, at least not in the same way they would hold accountable an adult for their actions, or you as an adult. If you were an adult, of course. And at the same time, again, your parents are the one responsible for your actions. And not just that, they're responsible for your health and your education and your well-being in general, at least in the sense that if some aspect of it deteriorates because of their negligence, they will be held accountable for it. And very, very bad things can happen to you if your parents are negligent. So let's say something bad does happen to you while you're a child. We all agree that it's not your responsibility, but your parents, insofar as they were negligent to some degree. Let's say now that you grow up, and that you experience difficulties in your performance in some aspect of your life. An aspect that is sufficiently related to the area of your life in which you had the bad experience as a child, that to conclude that the difficulties are caused, at least partially, because finding causality in life is pretty difficult, by the experience, is not a wild assumption or the result of a very convoluted way of thinking or reasoning. So it wouldn't take a very convoluted way of reasoning to assume that to some degree the difficulties you are experiencing are your parents' responsibility. And we may even agree on that. But here's the core argument. Insofar as you take that posture and validate that assumption, you will never experience full freedom. Let me explain why. First of all, there's the problem of specifying what is the degree in which your parents have responsibility over the difficulties you have now. But let's say you're reasonable and you keep it relatively low in your hypothesis of shared responsibility. There are more problems with it. And the first is that small percentage of responsibility over the difficulties that belongs to your parents doesn't belong to you. So you will always have that excuse. The next is a major one. Difficulties in some area of your life don't present themselves in some abstract manner. They present themselves as a oh my god, English is difficult. Variety. Oh my god, I should have learned this word.
Variety
Of actions which involve from failed attempts at doing something and very hard work success. Hopefully. From that possibility all the way to doing things that you didn't really want to do, and maybe hurting yourself and others. So this problem confronts you with the question: your parents are responsible to some degree for your actions as an adult? Because that is what the initial assumption implies. And as we established before, that means that to some degree you are not responsible for your actions. And the potential problems with this way of viewing things are self-evident. The last problem is the one that demonstrates my point. So let's go for it. Let's say you have this assumption made. And you find it reasonable. But instead of validating it, you say, even though my parents have a percentage of responsibility in me having these difficulties, from now on, I will take full responsibility for them. So, what do you have now? What do you have now? Difficulties. It ain't a great situation, and not much has changed, right? Wrong. They're your difficulties. Fully. And I will go into why this difference is important, but first let's clarify that there's no guarantee that by doing this you will actually overcome them. So it's understandable that at first sight there's no evident benefit in doing it. But let's go to the other case scenario in this example. You stay with the assumption that the difficulties you experience in your adult life are to some degree the responsibility of your parents. Even if you think of them as grains of sand in a beach or in the ocean for that matter, and only one grain belongs to them. Insofar as you validate this idea, you will never own all the grains. So you will never be able to fully overcome your difficulties. In the previous case scenario, you might never overcome your difficulties. But in this case scenario, the possibility of fully overcoming them is out of the question. It's not there. So you will never be able to fully overcome your difficulties, because what is not your responsibility is not in your domain of ability to truly transform. So, from the moment the possibility to make the choice and take full responsibility presents to you, maybe as the idea pops up in your head, you have the freedom to take responsibility. So yes, freedom comes first, surprise. But it's only a seed of freedom. Because you only have two options. And you can put the seed of freedom, in the ground, that is responsibility. And it may or may not grow to be a fully grown tree, a fully grown tree of freedom. And if it does, it may be healthy and tall and give fruit and provide more seeds, or it may be weak and unhealthy. And this will depend to some degree in the quality of the ground, the quality of the responsibility. But you can also keep the seed in the bag and pushing the idea back, pushing the idea of taking full responsibility to the back of your head, and there will never be a tree. And luckily the seed will just stay there, showing up once in a while, when you search for something in the bag. But unluckily, it will get rotten. So when you decide to put it on the ground, it's too late. So the true origin of freedom is actually a mystery. How does the idea pop up in your head? It might even have a divine origin. But my main point is that even if that's the case, divinity only provides you with a seed of freedom. Two options: taking or not taking responsibility. And responsibility is absolutely necessary to transform that two-option scenario into a fully grown tree of opportunities. So that's the text, and more content is on the way. This is the first text I ever wrote regarding some philosophical theme or some reasoning about life and actions and a way to move forwards. There are more, and some of them are published in my Patreon and in my temporarily webpage. I'm not sure about that webpage because I do not own the domain, but I will link the Patreon, and hopefully I'll see you again.